So now I'm going to invite the speakers back up to the stage for a panel discussion that will be moderated by Claire Biot, who spoke earlier. And she will be addressing an informal question on, we tried to give you a sampling all throughout the entire range, the life cycle of how these technologies can affect healthcare. And so we'll spend the next 30 minutes discussing, where they discuss some thoughts about how machine learning and AI can really affect the future. So with that, I'd like to invite the panelists up. Claire. And as I mentioned earlier, Afra had to catch a plane. So fortunately, that left us room for an additional panelist. We're graciously joined by Reza Sadeki, who's VP of Strategy for the BioVia brand. I don't think you'll need this, but just in case.
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay.
Wow, what an afternoon. I really want to thank all our speakers, and I'm just maybe going to introduce Reza. I mean, you did it already, Steve, but Reza, you're the Chief Strategy Officer at BioVia. Welcome to this panel.
Thank you.
As a short introduction, I wanted to say, well, today we have explored how predictive modeling, leveraging historic data to forecast future outcomes. We have seen how computational phenotyping converts complex medical records into meaningful concepts, while patient similarity identifies individuals with similar characteristics for personalized care. So leveraging big data or smart data in healthcare is essential, while it presents challenges with millions of patient records, diverse data sources. I think we have seen all this early this afternoon. We haven't mentioned it so much, but privacy laws further complicate accessing valuable patient data. And so AI and ML algorithms offer solutions to that extent. In our view at Dassault Systèmes, virtual data serves as a cost-effective and complementary resource, addressing data limitations and enhancing our understanding of disease mechanisms. By harnessing real patient data, virtual twin simulations provide vast amounts of information, fundamentally transforming healthcare. And so it's a really exciting panel that I am hosting now. And I would like to start with the first question. So I'm going to address the question to all the speakers, and it's going to be very interesting to see the flow of answers and how you can react to one another. So feel free to interject anytime. And so my first question would be, how can AI and virtual twin technology contribute to personalized medicine? Can you share with us examples, and how can these tools help tailor medical devices or drugs to individual patient needs? Ilan, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So first of all, I think we should probably think about virtual human twins in general. What do we mean by this, right? We've mentioned this all the time, and I think just to back up, generally people associate with this something that is continuously updated, so it's really, really expensive. So before we commit, I think we need to really think about, is it worth all the trouble? And I think we've heard yesterday and today that a lot of people are very, very excited about the technology, mainly for personalized applications and really personalizing the twin. Another question I think to define before we all fully engage is how personal. I think Steve mentioned a couple of times, how perfect does it need to be? So how personal does it need to be? And I think that's all interesting aspects of it. I think we would all agree that probably we want to do this. The applications, to come back to your question, would obviously be, I think they have been discussed, would be diagnostics, personalized surgical planning, personalized drug development, treatment planning in general. Predictions and also training has been, I think, in your playground, we've seen a lot of applications, just training or visualization for the patient. So I think there's ample of applications, and we're all excited. I think we just probably need to narrow a little bit what would be the first step that would be the best, the highest impact at this point.
And do you want to make a guess? Like, what would be your favorite?
I'd like to hear from the others what they think in general.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the whole technology is just, I mean, with all the examples we're seeing here, like it's I don't know, it's just admiring in how many aspects the virtual twins are helping us in getting to personalized medicine. I would say, like, it's sort of a whole literal playground for us to explore where we can help the patient. And for me, this is just the beginning. Like it really feels like we're at a starting point, although we've been doing this now for 9 years already with the whole consortium. And now what we're seeing with AI is that we're just getting a whole new ton of tools or like toys basically to help us in the challenges we are having in personalizing and the technology and finding indeed, as was referred to before, like do we need the patient-specific one, or can we have specific populations and automatically identify to which population a patient belongs? I think that's the exciting aspect of it right now as well.
Yeah, I think there's like a macro view and a micro view, and I think all of the concepts and ideas are on the macro level. I like to try to do little smaller wins and look at what am I working on today and how do I personalize it, for instance, and I'll give you an example. So we're building classifiers, movement classifiers, so we're able to classify when people are walking. It's a pretty simple machine learning model, but it's based on the obviously the data and the people that are trained. I know at first the approach was let's build a generalizable model so we can target 90% or more of the population with a single model. And now we're thinking, well, everybody walks really differently. And when we actually look at the data, it looks like a QR code. And at like my walk gait, I'm a healthy person, but it might be different than your walk gait and your walk gait. And maybe if we feed it some parameters around leg length and how tall you are and age and BMI, we're able now to create a personalized algorithm to classify walking. So I like, that's kind of the way that I've been thinking about it. So trying to carve out little areas that we can innovate in.
So when it comes to virtual twins, a virtual twin of a drug is really what we have. And it's a long journey, so we live with that virtual twin all the way to clinical. Personalizing it is really what it needs to be going on. It is happening. Scale is increasing. The fidelity of the virtual twin of the drug is improving. And it's necessary, particularly when we get to biologics. Why? Mutations happen. We all lived through COVID. Some of us got it, some of us didn't get it, some of us got the mutations. Mutations are actually a lot more sensitive and real than some of us may be exposed to it. So the virtual twin is an absolute essential piece of what we do in drug design and discovery. And it simply needs to get better. Somebody mentioned CAR-T. CAR-T is all about personalization. CRISPR, all about personalization. On and on, immunotherapy. So without it, there won't be any good drugs coming out. And we'll get into it later on. How can AI help in that process?
Thank you, Reza. I want to switch gears a bit because we speak, like this is a panel discussion about AI, and Hélène, you started your presentation by saying AI can be seen as a black box, and we don't want to have a black box, and we want to understand mechanisms. So I'd like to come back to that and discuss with you, how the use of virtual twins can help understand the limitations, the potential risks of AI-based treatments, or help communicate them effectively to patients. I don't know if someone wants to start.
I mean, I can start on this. I think what AI, as we all know, what AI is really good at is interpolation. Mm-hmm. It's not really good at extrapolation. And I think as we were talking about synergies as well, it's really that where virtual twins can shine, in my opinion, and where we can use it to explore cases that we don't necessarily have data for example, yet, and we use the physics to help us. Like Ellen also showed in her presentation, like if you don't have the physics in there, it just doesn't generalize, right? So I think that's an important aspect where virtual twins help us with AI in general and help us with the risks of it.
I think there are a lot of dangers too, because it looks so good. I mean, it's so perfect almost. When Steve had the introduction to the session, it was perfect, but it wouldn't affect anyone. If you use this in healthcare, if you have something that looks perfect, but it isn't, it will really affect lives. And I think it's important, I think what you both said, is that we need to look at the results, at least in the very beginning, and really, really look at them with the eye of someone who understands the physics, understands the medical aspects of it, because it just looks so realistic. I mean, you can make everything, every simulation can look now so perfectly realistic that it's almost a risk to trust all of that. And I think we in the room, we are actually collectively called to action to look at this more carefully with all our knowledge to make sure that it's really telling us what it needs to tell us.
One of the limitations that's very real in my life, in my community's life, is generative AI is helping us invent new therapeutics. You look at an aspirin, it's made out of 23 atoms. You look at the Humira, it's got 300,000 pieces that come together and make Humira. You go to some biologics, the number gets much, much larger. With generative AI, we can put these things together, but then you show it to a chemist, they look at it and you see their faces go crazy. It's like, one, how do I make this? How do I set this up? Second, what could be some toxicity aspect associated with some of these concepts that the AI comes up with? The design space is 10 to the power of 62. Humans are cautious not to go certain places. AI goes everywhere and finds amazing solutions. Now it's our task to make sure it's contained into a safe space.
So Reza, maybe we can stay with you and you can take a step back and explain to us what are the main challenges in drug discovery, drug development. I showed a very little piece of generative therapeutic design this morning, but maybe you can show us, come back to that and explain how AI helps.
AI is a must-have in drug design and discovery, therapeutic design and discovery. Why? Again, I mentioned the design space being complex, but the return on investment in biopharma is not where it needs to be. The attrition, the number of failures are enormous. 50% of our designs, I mean, I come from the design world myself, 50% of the designs fail before they go into detailed design. Equivalent of detail. What am I talking about? In drug discovery, you go from target identification to a lead. It's the lead that eventually becomes a drug. 50% fail in that space. Once you get a lead and you optimize that lead using GTD that you demonstrated earlier on, 90% of those fail by the time you get to preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Doesn't leave a whole lot of room. So from lots of options down to one that goes to clinical. When it goes to clinical, there's a 90% chance of one of them failing, and there's only one that's going into clinical. So there's an absolute necessity for it that we do bring AI into this to reduce the time. The time it takes to do this, for some of you in this space, you may know this already, it's somewhere between 10 years to 12 years to get an idea to clinical, eventually out of clinical, approved. Cost, $1 billion plus. The cost of getting a compound from an early design to getting to clinical is around 500 to 700 million for one compound. So AI is a must-have to bring this problem under control and speed up the process of failing and the process of winning. Failing is just as important because these concepts, some of them work, some of them don't work. So if you've got a 90% chance of attrition, the sooner you know this is not going to work, the sooner you can go to the next idea, cut the losses, and move on to the next topic. And AI has done an amazing job in helping us in that regard. I'll give you an example. Historically, if I were to take for those of you who do micromechanics and molecular mechanics, if I were to use molecular dynamics, quantum basically, approach of modeling a drug against the protein, it would require maybe a couple thousand CPU hours to get to a meaningful simulation. Not one, multiple simulations, and use SAR methods on top of that. With GPU and parallelization, we got it down to a couple hundred hours. With AI and GPU, the equivalent of OpenFold and AlphaFold, 2 hours. So you can imagine this logarithmic power that AI brings to improve efficiency of the twin of the drug that is a must-have, not a nice-to-have, must-have, and eliminate some of the physical testing that otherwise would have to happen. And the goal of AI is to take that 12 years and bring it down to a meaningful reduction, 50%.
Thanks, Reza. I'd like to come back to another topic that's been, I think, highlighted in your presentations this afternoon. It's the fact that AI is only going to be good if the data that you feed it with is good. And to that extent, I'd like to come back and hear a bit more of your thoughts about how virtual twins can help generate good quality data to feed the AI. Melissa, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So in the study that we're running right now in pulmonary hypertension and heart failure, the goal is to have age-matched controls. But when we try to find healthy age-matched controls, we're not finding them because of the definition of healthy at the extended age. So most of our controls are 30 years or lower. And so I think that this is a ripe opportunity, right, to use a synthetic control and not be pounding and trying to figure out how to get more physical human beings, but actually leverage the data that we already have. And I think Afra showed how we're doing some of that simulation and how we're creating that data set. So I think it's a great place to leverage that.
Yeah, something that we also were looking in one of the case studies that I mentioned, for example, is also like for drug-induced arrhythmogenesis, we were trying to look at sex differences, but then if you look historically at the clinical trials that have been done, you saw a huge sex bias in there. So it was, the virtual twins allowed us basically to level the input data again, to take out those biases. And I found that very important for us to do, because if you just take the data that we have and there is a bias in there, it's going to be in your AI model as well. But with virtual twins, we can sort of try to balance the scales again to do some good, at least. So I thought that was like an important aspect of virtual twin in this regard.
I can quickly comment on generative elements, which sort of is meant to address the problem that's clearly articulated, meaning that the results are as good as the data that goes in. The generative AI systems, the GP systems, they're retrained. They're more autonomous in retraining themselves. Therefore, they can eliminate some of the sparsity. Totally agree. It's about interpolation, not extrapolation. But there's a lot of sparsity that causes problem in AI system. You have a matrix that's got data here, data there, and a lot of sparse space in between. So we, through generative methods, self-healing methods, there are good methods coming online to fix that. But it doesn't eliminate the need for real data, and that's where in Dassault Systèmes strategy, you may have seen a V plus R, virtual plus real. AI can inform the real world can inform the AI system, and together we can minimize the amount of physical testing that you have to do to put together a meaningful data set that could go on and inform the system for better state of design.
Thank you, Reza. I want to come back to, like, we started this panel discussion talking about precision medicine, and we know how important this is, and I think we're really at a time when we can think about democratizing precision medicine. But at the same time, I like to ask you, if can AI methods can be used to generalize some findings that you would have for a given population of interest or for a given individual to a wider population?
I think, yeah, from my perspective, I think what it's nice to is what AI can help us with is finding patterns, so categorizing, stratifying patients so that we don't redo simulations, for example, on patients that we already know enough of, but indeed explore without bias from us as humans, the other aspects of this patient population so that we can use this to our advantage to serve as wide a population as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it goes to the point that you were raising earlier, Melissa, about being able to stratifying populations based on given criteria. Hélène, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it would be just very expensive to create a real virtual human twin of everyone here in the room, right? So I think that there is a need to get started by just really feature-based clustering and really get started on that and then interpolate, extrapolate within these spaces. But eventually, of course, the goal would be, the ultimate goal would be to have a twin of each and every one of us. But to get started, I think the features and then clustering on features is probably a really valuable first step.
So let me switch gears a bit and think about the healthcare professionals that are going to use these virtual twins. Like we have been talking a lot about the impact for the patient. Now can we think about some use cases where AI can help building a tool for training, can add to, can help healthcare professionals in understanding what they're doing. And here again, coming back to that concept of black box, if there is some AI, how can virtual twins be helpful for healthcare professionals in understanding what they're doing?
I think it's very intuitive to see things in 3D or 2D on the screen rather than just seeing all the data. So, I mean, in that sense, it's just incredibly powerful, especially for doctors to learn, but also for patients to illustrate really what's going on. For collaboration, probably at distance, if you think of global health, it would be super beneficial if someone here were to talk to someone about a virtual twin and they really would see the thing, the organ or whatever they're talking about. You could do it at a distance. You could train someone far away, look at the same condition and discuss it. So I think really the power of visualization of digital twins in healthcare is just immense.
Yes. There's a soft element to this as well. I'm involved with UCSD, and there's an AI lab, and doctors come and get trained on certain procedures. Humans to humans correcting each other sometimes can become very emotional, but you'd be amazed how AI is correcting a given surgeon or surgeon in training and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and how effectively they overcome some of these challenges. So that was a soft topic, but it really is about 3D. It is about being able to visualize and create tactile in this process. A digital twin with an AI system that actually has measurements through the devices that you elegantly covered with us. Combination of the three really creates a new environment for learning and a new environment for correcting what it is that we're doing well and could do possibly better, or not doing well and do better. It's an amazing combination when you see it in action, particularly in the surgery area.
I think certainly there's a lot of the technology and technology readiness and kind of in different phases. But the standard of practice right now for healthcare professionals is not to use the technology until it's been validated. And so often, you hear anecdotes of patients going to their doctor and showing their, some of their data that they've collected, or, maybe even some, early clinical decision support tools. And so I think that we can try to make it more adoptive, and instead of it being the exception, it's part of the standard practice, standard of care, that they're really consuming these new tools in order to get a better view of what's going on with the patient from more of an objective standpoint. So I really, I think of this similarly of your question about the biomarkers and how are we going to get it to pass the goal line. I think it's like everything that we're working on is there. It's really the adoption curve and getting the comfort and the kind of the validation that's required in order for clinicians to accept it.
Yeah, agreed. I think and we have seen some approvals from FDA and other regulatory agencies for AI-assisted software, and I think, as it goes and as the curve goes up, we will see more adoption from the physicians for sure. I want to come back to that single versus population, and Melissa, I wanted to ask you, what are the different ways AI technology can improve the development or the use of virtual twins or disease populations in a patient-specific physiology?
Yeah, so one of the examples that I gave earlier in CNS, so we're able to look at specific symptoms of Huntington's or tremor, so these mobility symptoms that are easily detectable, and through looking at the trajectory of the patient and how they're performing on a therapy, we're able to identify responders. And so out of the cohort that a pharma company is studying, who, based on their physiological signals, are going to respond to a specific therapy. And so that can be used in recruitment, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can use that to help guide the design of studies, as well as also if we know that there's a bad outcome, we can be preventive and be able to apply that prediction early on. There's another company that's working, we were talking about CAR T therapy earlier. There's a few companies that are working on advanced alerts for fever monitoring and advanced alerts for in maybe days in advance. I know definitely a company, TempTrack, they have an hour in advance of fever, but there's other algorithms that can detect fever using the collection of physiological signals earlier, and I think that will save people's lives, right, in order to be able to have that preventative type of application.
Is that something that could also go into remote diagnostics? I think that would probably be a whole area.
Yes, safety monitoring, real-time
of
monitoring.
Elderly people, for example, in their house or just at a distance.
Yeah, and predicting a fall before it occurs, predicting a cardiac arrest before it occurs, predicting fevers. All of that is now, we're seeing early evidence that that's possible with their physiological signals.
Or predicting cytokine release syndrome in the case of CAR T injections.
Yes, we talk about that a lot at Medidata, yes.
So we're coming to the end of the panel. I would like to ask all of you a question, which is a tough one, I think, based on all the exciting work we have seen early this afternoon. So I think what we have seen is quite a breakthrough, but if we project 10 years ahead, what are the major advancements that you anticipate in the field of AI and it's coming closer to virtual twin technologies?
I'll get us started. The virtual twins, as we've seen between last year, this year, and I'm looking forward to next year, Steve, they're improving dramatically. Combination of AI systems using twins to learn. So twins that could be created to teach the AI system and create the training set. That is a brand new horizon for AI. And there's classes being formulated as we speak to do that, to create twins, to create the data sets, which is, as it was said, without the data set, we can't go anywhere. What kind of things can we come up with when we do that? Systems that we're just not today willing to spend the money to go after. Building the type of systems is just way too expensive to go do because we will have to start with physical twins. With virtual twins getting to where they are, AI systems teaching the virtual twins to improve themselves, that loop will open a new horizon for a whole new set of technologies associated with energy, sustainability, and other topics. The whole class of material sciences is begging for this to happen so we can reduce the time to get to a new class of material that is less damaging to the environment, requires a lot less resources such as water to process them, to build them, etc.
I think in general, systems is actually a word, right? I mean,
Yes.
if you think of organs, we've all kind of talked throughout the symposium about individual organs. I think when we come back in a year from now, people will be thinking a lot more about how to bring this, and Steve mentioned that as well, to a really whole holistic modeling of the whole systems, organs acting together, and actually, like you said, beyond the person, the influence on the planet as a whole.
On the planet, yes.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that because it was complementary to what I was thinking, Ellen, that things in 10 years will be more closed loop and automated. So if we detect something, then the patient can be called to action, right? In order for this to be a continuous learning system where the technology is providing a measurement and then the patient is or the human is part of the experience, right? And it's all connected. It's where we don't have to push buttons or have any manual intervention. It's part of the system and the product that we're developing.
And for me, to align with this, what I hope that will enable us to do is also to move towards prevention, like that we can use that to understand what the long-term effects are of certain things and how then with patients being informed of what the risks of those specific acts would be on their body, for example, would also be very strong in prevention, which I think we will need to deal with the problems of tomorrow.
Well, with that, I want to thank you, the four of you, for your three of you for some very exciting presentations, and Reza, you've done that in many other occasions, and shown us how AI is really going to complement so well with virtual twin technologies to accelerate access to innovation for patients, making them more like actors of their own health, and so it's a bright future ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good job. Okay, safe trip.
Thank you.
And with that, over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Claire. Okay. All right. Well, miraculously, we are spot on schedule. Thank you all for, certainly to the speakers, for sticking to the schedule. It was tough, massive amount of information. I know you'll be digesting for a long time. And right now, you've got 30 minutes to digest at the coffee break. And then we're in the home stretch. We have one more session. But you want to come back, you want to be right on time, because we're going to be rolling out some new ideas, some new things we're working on. I think you find this, this last session, between what we just talked about and the new things we're doing in the last session, I think we'll end this session, this symposium, on a really solid note. So go out, enjoy. I think there's refreshments right out here. If you do want to go to the playground, you're welcome to. Just make sure you're back at 3:30. Oh, they closed it? Okay, you're stuck here, come on back. If you come back early, that's good too.